Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, and I want to now look ahead to the 2028 Olympics. I know getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I was thinking about this yesterday while watching Team USA, that we have Kevin Durant passing Lisa Leslie for the all-time leading scorer in U.S. Olympic history from men's and women's. You had him just become the all-time leading rebounder. LeBron James, he is at the end of his Olympic career, already said that he won't be participating in 2028. He's hit a couple milestones along the way as well, 300 points and 100 assists all time. And we are going to be heading into a different era of basketball in the NBA, which has been a big topic of conversation. Obviously, this whole who is going to be the next face of the league debate has been surrounding things, but I was thinking about how that translates to the Olympic front as well, and what this next generation of Olympic stars is going to be. Because you look at, I would say probably, and I know recency bias, and I also understand I wasn't quite old enough to watch the Dream Team and everything, but if you're looking at overall career accolades with the Olympic team specifically, and just taking that sample size into consideration, probably the three best U.S. Olympians, at least on the men's side of all time, are, in some order, I would say Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Carmelo Anthony. And now that we are going to be past all of them, you do start to wonder, is there any chance that any of the current players on this roster will be able to carry the torch? And I would say the name that jumps off of the page from that front is Anthony Edwards. And obviously Edwards very much involved in the future face of the league conversation as well, but from a Team USA perspective, he came into the FIBA World Cup last year and he lit the team on fire. It was impossible to ignore what he was it was impossible to ignore what he was doing, and ultimately he has been really impressive once again for Team USA in this year's Olympic Games as well. Just in this past game, he had, I believe it was 17 points versus Brazil, which was second on the team. He just led the team in scoring in their last game as well, in their final game of the group stage. So I think that Anthony Edwards is a prime candidate for becoming the face of Team USA basketball, but there are a number of other players as well on this current Olympic squad that I think are going to be back at least for another round in 2028, along with Anthony Edwards in those face of the leagues conversation. Jason Tatum is typically a part of that as well. He is already at this point in his second Olympics, so he could be 28 years old and a three-time Olympian, and or it would be 30 years old by 2028, and he could already have 3 gold medals to his name at that point. He was very impressive the first time go around, averaged 15 points per game in the 2020 Olympics when they won the gold in that game. In that summer, I know that obviously it's been a little bit of a different story for Tatum so far this year, but is still a very talented player that I have to imagine is going to find his way into the rotation for years to come. Some of the other names that I think are kind of no-brainers as long as they are still physically available to play in 2028, Devin Booker, Bam Adebayo, Tyrese Halliburton, all of them I would sort of chalk into this conversation as well. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago as well. The only other player on the roster, so it's Edwards, Tatum, Booker, Adebayo, and Halliburton. there's a lot of experienced talent on this Team USA roster right now. The only other player that I think really has a great chance to be in the 2028 team is Derek White, surprisingly enough, where he could sort of slide into that Jrue Holiday role like we talked about before. Grant Hill and a lot of the executives with Team USA have talked about the fact that Jrue Holiday is an easy sort of chalk it in name for Team USA on every year because of the fact that he provides leadership, defensive intensity, smart offensive understanding as well. And I think that Derek White checks a lot of those boxes as well, can play that same sort of unselfish role as Jrue Holiday. So I would say that those are probably the 6 out of this team that may be available for 2028 as well. Because you look at the other stars on this roster right now and how old they're going to be in 2028. Joel Embiid will be 34 years old, so that's not all too old, but we know with his injury history, with his body as a whole, this kind of might be a one-time thing for Team USA. Obviously depends on health, but if he's still playing up to what we know he can, I'm sure he would at least be considered for a roster spot. But outside of that, LeBron James, like I said, he already mentioned that this is his last Olympics. He's going to be 43 years old in 2028. Steph Curry will be 40. Kevin Durant will be 39. Anthony Davis at 36 is maybe a possibility, especially if the U.S. is short on centers and big men at that point. And then you have Jrue Holiday, who's going to be 38. So, again, I think that there's only going to be a limited number of these guys returning for 2028, which the way that I have marked it up here, 6 returning players, maybe it's 5 if Derek White gets left off of that roster. There's going to be a lot of spots to fill for Team USA, and it's going to have to be coming out of this upcoming youth movement. So I just wanted to go through the list of names that could potentially be in play for the 2028 Olympics. Out of the up-and-coming guards, I think the 3 names that jumped off the page to me were Ja Morant, Cade Cunningham, and Tyrese Maxey. Out of this group, I'm still so high on Cade Cunningham, and I know that I'm high on Maxey and Morant as well. Don't want to downplay them by any means, but I know that the past couple seasons have not gone well for Cade in Detroit, but I'm just not turning the page on him because there hasn't been team success with Detroit. If you look at what he does from an individual standpoint, he is such a capable scorer and passer. I think that the defense is coming, especially as Detroit and everything around him improves on that defensive side of the floor. He will elevate his game there. He's got the size, he's got the physical tools, everything you need, that I think he would be a great fit. The forwards that I am thinking about would be Paolo Banchero, Jalen Williams, Zion Williamson, Scotty Barnes, and I'll throw Cooper Flagg into that conversation as well. Obviously was on the select team this year and was scrimmaging with Team USA. At this point, you know, Cooper Flagg, I can do a quick double check, but Cooper Flagg is just 17 years old still, which is crazy. So he'd still only be 21, so maybe it's a little bit premature to assume that he could be on this team, but the U.S. has holes that they are trying to fill in 2028. Anthony Edwards is only 22 years old right now, and, you know, Edwards had a little bit of previous Team USA experience. Cooper Flagg currently does, in the way that he was able to introduce himself and be a very solid player. You saw the clips, you heard the stories that were coming out of practice, that he was impressing a lot of people during the scrimmages, that I think he would very much be in play. And then really the top big men, because I don't think that there is a ton. You look at sort of how things have broken out these past couple years, and a lot of the top big men in the NBA are international players, but I think that it would be Bam moving into the starting lineup, and then backups. I think that Chet Holmgren and Evan Mobley would be great bets to make this roster, especially Chet, considering some of the offensive upside as well. I'm still a believer in Evan Mobley, even if I don't love the direction that things have been headed as of late, but I think that he's going to eventually break out in a really big way for Team USA. So they would both be, again, there's no such thing as locks 4 years ahead, but I think that both of them would be extremely compelling candidates to make this team a few years from now. So, again, if we are going under the assumption that Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, Bam Adebayo, and Tyrese Halliburton are all going to make the team in 2028, and then let's even throw Derek White in there, that would be 6 spots they have to fill. My money would be on Cade Cunningham making the team, probably a Tyrese Maxey. I'd say one of him or Ja Morant. I don't think that all 3 of the guards that I mentioned would make the team. The U.S. is going to need, especially because you see a lot of good forwards, especially overseas, so I think that they would probably lean more so to the forward spot, where I would guess Paolo Banchero, Jalen Williams, and Cooper Flagg probably would be the 3. Scotty Barnes is an interesting piece as well because of his versatility, because of all the different things that he can give you. He can rebound, he can play defense, the three-point shot is improving, he can pass as well. So Scotty is somebody that I think, especially if you're going to open up, maybe Derek White doesn't make it and slide in another one of these players, Scotty Barnes would probably be the direction I would go in. And then I think Chet Holmgren and Evan Mobley would round out the roster. And that is a very good group. But obviously what I'm so excited about as well is the fact that we are seeing the growth of the game internationally. And, you know, especially knowing that Wembanyama is only going to continue to get better for France, that would start to be a little bit of a real mismatch of him versus, I mean, Bam, Chet, Evan Mobley, all great. I would love to see, now that I'm talking about this out loud, I would love to see Chet Holmgren versus Victor Wembanyama on the national stage. I think that would be so fun to watch. But, you know, I think that the big man position is probably where the rest of the world is catching up the most, I would say. Especially when you look at some of those European countries and the way that they've been able to develop their big men. Jokic, Giannis, Domantas Sabonis, who isn't playing in these Olympics, but, you know, a list of very impressive names. Plus you add on top of that, you know, maybe an Alex Sarr if he fully develops. I know that a lot of the NBA fans are sort of turned off of Alex Sarr because of the Summer League, but listen, it's just Summer League. I wouldn't necessarily bank your entire stock on a player just based off of that. But let me know who you think I'm missing out on. Again, I sort of went with some of the younger stars and where I think they'll be in 4 years, but there's a chance as well that, you know, a Brandon Ingram could possibly have a resurgence and find his way back into things. Zion, I didn't give all too much consideration. I mean, I put him on the list, of course, but I feel like 4 years from now, there's probably going to be players you're taking above Zion. But again, let me know who you would love to see on a Team USA roster. But again, have a lot of time to sort of sit on this. We got a full 4 years. So again, just a little bit of a fun exercise here. Don't take it too seriously if I left your favorite player off of this list. But and Jaylen Brown as well, by the way, is another name that I didn't put on this, but because I was more so fixated on the youth, but I kind of feel like they would find a way to insert Jaylen Brown into it, you know, assuming that he is still playing the level of basketball we know he's capable of. So that was, again, definitely don't take it all too seriously. Just a little bit of a thought experiment here. But we are now going to be shifting gears to the NFL, and we got a very interesting article that dropped on ESPN outlining some of the dysfunction that took place in the Philadelphia Eagles locker room. This during the 2023 season and how they are trying to look to amend that coming into 2024 with high expectations. So we will talk about that. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.